Right where you are, I just want you to, right there in your seats, just shut your eyes. What you're about to hear are the sounds of metal BBs striking the side of a tin can. For every BB that strikes, it represents 10,000 lives lost in the wars of America's past. 10,000 lives for every BB. This is the reality of what is occurring in your country. The American Revolution, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean conflict, the conflict in Vietnam, September 11th and the War on Terror. Since 1973, the War on the Unborn Child. God help us.
Hello, my name is Lori Parker. I'm the Executive Director of First Care Women's Clinic. Thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who may not be familiar with First Care Women's Clinic, we're a ministry that reaches out into the community, and we reach men and women who are facing the difficulties of an unplanned pregnancy, speaking life into their crisis so they choose life for their unborn children. And because our doors are open, hundreds of children are spared from abortion every year. You know, a few months ago, we were planning the biggest fundraising event of our year, the banquet. It's so important because it is what funds our operating, a lot of it, and our growth. And we needed it. We had no idea that come banquet time, we'd be in the midst of a pandemic, but here we are. And if I was talking to you from a podium at a banquet hall, I would be much more formal because we'd be face to face in a big crowd, but I just want to be myself and I want to speak from my heart. And my prayer is that whether you're at a banquet table, eating a nice meal in a nice environment, all dressed up, or you're just listening to us on this taping, that you'll give like never before, because the need is greater than ever before. We are in a situation where our country is pretty much shut down, has been shut down for a while, and it's confusing and unsettling. For Christians, I think it's a particularly challenging time because we want to serve God, but at the same time, we want to protect ourselves and our family, not just from a virus, but from an unstable economy and where we're headed in the future. But I'm just here to tell you that evil doesn't hunker down, and evil doesn't fear a virus. Evil only thrives in the midst of it. I have no statistical data to give you to say that abortions are increasing because of this pandemic, except to say that the evidence seems to indicate that they are. The parking lot of the Planned Parenthood down here, right down the street from us, is fuller than it's ever been. Abortion clinics are saying that they're fuller than they usually are, and that they need more protective equipment and things to do those abortions that are just as essential as PPE. They need that PPE to do these essential abortions, killing of children. And so obviously, I feel that I'm concerned that 2020, when we get the statistics on abortion, we're going to be very saddened by the number of women who felt so hopeless, because these women are not always women who would have aborted. Their lives are unstable, and then they look at a world that's unstable, and they're really confused, and they feel that abortion may be their only option. And I'm so thankful that God is greater than all this evil. He's on the throne, and he's still with us. And he has got First Care Women's Clinic right here to meet these women where they are. And I'm so grateful for that. And our phones are ringing off the hook, and what we're hearing from women is that theme that it's just that this is future is so uncertain. I just don't know what's going on, and I just don't feel comfortable having a baby right now. We saw a woman named Tanya who had lost her job. She had 2 children and supported herself and her children fine until she lost her job. She applied for unemployment, but had not received any checks yet for weeks. And she said, by the time I get it, it'll probably be too little, too late. She felt that abortion was the only option she had at this point. And I sat down with her and I talked to her about it. And I didn't really change anything in her life. I just basically said, you're looking at your future and basing it on this temporary situation, and I don't see the hopelessness here. I see a woman who's determined and able and can. And I talked to her about how she loved her other children and what made her not ever consider abortion before, but now, and what's the difference. So when I talked to her, she really was responsive, and we took her to see the ultrasound, and she was thrilled to see the baby on the image on the screen. And when she left, she said something very profound to me. And she said, it's kind of like God just picked me up and set me on a rock. And I felt like he really had. But when she left it, I had to take that myself, and I had to take my own advice and say, if I tell her that she can have hope in the future and trust God for the future, then I have to be able to do the same thing. And my concern has been for First Care Women's Clinic, because we have a God-given mission. We are working toward becoming such a strong medical clinic that we will be the go-to place for women who need medical care. And through that, develop relationships with them, be able to give them life-affirming information and help them to make lifestyle changes and really change their lives and become the go-to place instead of Planned Parenthood. So that is the vision God's given us. We've been working toward that for years. We're now in this large facility, and we're able to do it. And we were hiring this year. This was the ramp-up year. This was the year we were hiring 2 sonographers and 1 nurse practitioner, which would allow us to do exams, and then you could just add services and add services. And because our services are so professional and we have so much compassion, we are just better equipped to do this. And I look at it, and all of a sudden the virus hits and everything's on hold. And at first, it's unsettling. And you think, well, God, you gave us this vision, you gave us this plan. And then I realized that it's still his vision, it's still his plan. And he just called us to focus on the crisis at hand right now. And we are doing just that. We're focusing on these abortion-minded women. We're also focusing on women that we've served who are, a lot of them, single women that have children that are going through a difficult time because they've lost their job and they're really struggling financially. So we've been giving thousands of dollars out in financial aid. We're also been giving hundreds of diapers, wipes, and I actually have ordered formula and sent it to their home so they didn't have to take their kids out, just all kinds of baby supplies. So as I look at the fact that our plans have been put on hold, and I look at a canceled banquet that helped to fund all those plans, I admit I worried for a bit. And I realized, though, that Christians don't leave the battle because of crisis. We actually engage more. As evil raises up, we raise up with it, and we just engage like never before. We advance. So my passion has actually grown in the midst of this as I've watched the parking lots of the abortion clinic down the street from us and say, this is why we need to grow and be what God has envisioned us to be. And this is why we're doing all of this. And I want us to be the one who sees the majority of these women that in the future, if we ever have any issues like this, and even when things are going well, we're the place that they go. I'm not afraid anymore, and I plan to step out in faith, and we're going to reach more and save more. We're going to hire the medical staff that we intended to hire, and we're going to move forward. Fear is filling the pockets of the abortionists right now, but it's not going to fill my heart, and I hope it doesn't fill yours as well. The casualty of this virus is not just the people who died from it. It's fear that has caused so many women to abort and the children that have been lost from it as a result. This pandemic should remind us all that as long as abortion is part of our culture, when there's ever instability, that there's probably going to be an increase in abortion. We expect more pregnancies because of the shelter in place, and we want to be ready for that. We want to be ready to meet the needs of these women. So as we step in faith, we need you to step in faith like never before and support First Care Women's Clinic? How can we tell someone like Tanya that she needs to trust God in the future and not abort her child if we're not willing to do that in our own lives? And I think there's lessons to be learned. And one of the biggest lessons is that we thought we controlled our lives. We are the ones who built our empires. And we didn't. We see that now, that they can be easily crumbled. And we also see that the government is not going to bail us out. God is in control. And when we put our trust and our faith in God, then we have to know that it's not a time to tighten our purse strings, but to open them and to trust Him that He expects us as Christians to be out in that battlefield like never before, to be part of the solution. And I want you to imagine yourself taking your hand down and lifting someone like Tanya, who is drowning in despair and hopelessness, and putting her on the rock. And just know that when you give to First Care Women's Clinic, that's exactly what you're doing, because we have a lot of Tanyas that we see. I know that, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm ready to move forward. I know that God has a vision for First Care Women's Clinic. You have always, as a supporter of this ministry and the pro-life cause, have always been there for us. God has always provided, and I am trusting in that. I believe that First Care Women's Clinic is going to raise up to be an amazing, amazing medical clinic with a component that is different than any other place. And that is one that ministers the gospel of Jesus Christ, that actually ministers into the lives of the women we see and actually practically helps them with things that they need. This is an amazing combination that teaches them how to live more productive and healthy lives. I believe that the future, because we will grow and get stronger, we will see the numbers in the area that God has given us to influence reduced drastically. I believe that there will come a time when we will see abortion as something unthinkable, something that we read about in the history books and can't believe actually took place in this country. So if you're watching this, God called you to watch it. I'm asking you to take that step in faith and give like never before. Make sure that we have that front line covered, that babies are not the casualty of the fear of COVID-19, that no one can use it as a weapon, that Satan and evil cannot use it as a weapon to destroy the lives of unborn children and their mothers and their fathers. So thank you so much for listening. And I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, which is Mr. Jay Watts. Mr. Watts has been a friend of the ministries for a long time. He's been a friend of mine for a very long time. He actually started and got involved in pro-life ministry when he volunteered with his Sunday school class to help us out one time. And that was decades ago. He walked up to me and said, I feel called to do this. I don't know what I'm called to do, but I want to do something. And it's just like God said, hire him. So he started out working with us, but I knew that wasn't going to last very long. And it didn't. Before long, in a couple of years, he joined with Life Training Institute, a pro-life apologist group. And now, a couple of years ago, he founded his own ministry called Merely Human. And it does many great things, but the two things that really touch me is he has the ability to go out into a secular community and secular audiences and state that pro-life position in a rational way that people receive, that they're not angered by, and so they listen. And he has swayed a lot of people and made them question their commitment to a pro-abortion view. He also equips us as pro-life advocates to be able to articulate why we're pro-life and give the facts without getting into arguments or having to go down rabbit trails defending every aspect of it. And we've all been there. So please join me in welcoming my good friend, Jay Watts.
This is Jay Watts from Merely Human Ministries. I really, really wish that we were all together at Marietta Conference Center, but since we can't be there, I'm here in my basement. And this will at one point be a very cool studio for Merely Human Ministries where we can record video and audio and all the different things that we want to do. But for the time being, it's still just my unfinished basement. And I'm doing video here, and we might record some audio up in my dining room. And we're spread all over the place trying to make the best of what coronavirus has done to all of us, which is separate us so that we can't be together the way that we want to be. Fellowships is a part of the human experience. and we will be coming back together. But at this point, it doesn't change the message. There's a reason why I start every talk that I do all over the country when I'm talking to Christian audiences, or even when we're doing things online right now with James 4:17. James 4:17 tells us that any man, anyone who knows the good that they ought to do and doesn't do it, sins. Now, the book of James has not been universally loved or beloved by the Christians throughout history. There have been some very influential and powerful Christians that don't like it at all because they feel like the book of James teaches a message of works-based salvation. But it doesn't. It starts off saying that we're saved by grace, but then it drives home a very strong message. What you do, the actions that you perform, the ways that you treat other people, the things that we do during the course of our life, they tell the world something important about us. They give a window into our soul in a way that what we say doesn't. We can say all the right things, but what James says, if what your life is doing doesn't align with the truth of someone who is in love with and redeemed through Jesus Christ, then what's dishonest is what you're saying, because your life demonstrates the truth of what you are. You're not saved by those works, but that if you continue to pursue the wrong action, to commit sins of commission, the things you do, lie, cheat, steal, while claiming to be loved by God and to be in a relationship with him, then you are just false and not to be trusted. But then he goes on even beyond that and says in 4:17, and anyone who knows the good that he ought to do and doesn't do it, for him it is sin. This is a different kind of sin. It's what we call a sin of omission. And when I talk, what I try to do is make the case for those who may be positionally pro-life. So if you ask them, they would say, yes, I'm pro-life. But they're not active. They're not doing things. Maybe they're not even fully aware of what that means when they make that declaration of being pro-life. I try to make a case for them that abortion is the kind of thing that we must stand up against. Find a meaningful way to engage it in our culture. And when we fail to do that, then abortion, fighting it, is the good that we ought to do, and failing to do so, we sin. Now, I do that by making a case for life, as I was taught to by Scott Klusendorf and Greg Kokel and my mentors that came before me. Now, I have a different presentation that I would be giving if we were together, but I'm going to talk a little about I'm going to do a little different kind of thing today. I woke up Saturday morning and I expected to be able to relax and have fun. And I had a Facebook message actually posted on my wall for everyone to see publicly, was a question from a dear friend of mine, Mark Mosley, who lives here in the Marietta area. And he said, Jay, what 3 things can we do to protect the unborn? And suddenly, I took this question, by the way, not to mean what can we do as a society? Because that's a less interesting question. I took it to mean what can any individual, what can we do to protect the unborn? Because when I get done speaking, that's often one of the first questions that I get. People will line up to talk to me afterwards, and they have questions, and they want more detail about things that I talked about. But one question that I hear a lot is, now what can I do? What can I do as an individual? You have made me believe, now what can I do? And so I thought that was a fair question to talk about in this shorter moment tonight. The first thing I answered was where we started. I said, be equipped to engage this issue in your life conversationally. Be equipped to advocate for the dignity of all human life, particularly the unborn, in your private life. Be capable of having conversations with other people without becoming the worst versions of yourself. Because in the end, the success that we will have in changing this culture from one that affirms the right to destroy life before it's born at somewhere about 60 million since 1973, to one that says all human beings ought to be treated with dignity and respect, the way that we bridge the gap between those two places, the world that we live in and the world that we want to live in, is how many people we convince to act in accordance with the view that all human life ought to be treated with dignity and respect. Every single one of us has the opportunity to advance that view into the life of the person right next to us. Our neighbors, our friends, our family. We can change this world so that abortion is unthinkable prior to becoming illegal. We're capable of having that kind of impact if we take the time to equip ourselves, to learn the arguments, to understand how to focus on the question, what is the unborn? And then we can focus on it and then argue our way through it. You see, the people who disagree with us, the pro-choice advocates that I encounter in this world, they're convinced that the unborn are the kind of thing that we're allowed to kill. They're convinced that there's something fundamentally different about them than us. That's why I start their conversations with them when I will say, would it be objectively wrong for you and I to kill each other? Almost everybody says yes. They all think it's wrong to kill other human beings. They just don't include the unborn in the same category of human life that they include them and me. The people that they say, yes, we should not kill each other, that would be wrong, objectively wrong. But we should be allowed to kill them. Why? Because there's something different. And so I ask the question back. What changed from the time that you and I were an embryo or a fetus to now, where we both agree it would be wrong to kill each other now, but you say it would have been okay to kill either one of us back then? Or more importantly, what are the unborn? What is that unborn life that we're allowed to kill them, but you agree with me that we should never kill each other? What is the unborn life that you think that we should be allowed to do to them the most gruesome and ghastly things that we can ever do to another life, that we do to them regularly, routinely through the practice of abortion? And then they're going to answer something at some moment. Some change of state happens where if we do the exact same thing to them in the next moment, it's the worst thing we can do to another human being. I learned how to make the case that no matter what they answer as I ask that question, I make the case back to them that from the moment of fertilization, the unborn are whole, distinct, and living human beings. The science of embryology confirms this. And according to a recent study that was done as part of a PhD thesis by Steve Jacobs at University of Chicago, 96% of academic biologists who were asked the question of when mammal life begins affirmed that it begins at fertilization. There's very little argument about the science. A human life begins at fertilization, whole, distinct, and living. So the next question is philosophical. What makes human life valuable? Why does that person who can't defend the proposition that that's not a human life believe that it's the kind of human life they're allowed to kill? Why do they make up ideas like a distinction between a human being and a human person, or a mere human and a personal human, and that mere humans I have no duty or obligation to, but personal humans I have an obligation to protect and restrict my behavior towards them? I say become equipped to defend the view that what makes human beings valuable is our shared humanity. That we can explain to people when we're asked that the only thing that all human beings share equally, in the same way that we share equal dignity, equal value, the same way that we understand that it would be wrong to murder somebody, and no matter what country that you lived in, no matter what law was governing it, no matter what culture you lived within, the same way we're capable of seeing that with clarity, we can see then that the wrongness of killing that human being must be tied into something that we share equally. If we have equal dignity, equal human rights, equal value, then it has to be grounded in something we share equally. But as Stephen Schwartz points out, differences of size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency, none of those are shared equally. As Christopher Kaiser, a Catholic philosopher, says, every one of them is degreed by their very nature. Every one of them is episodic, how big you are, what kind of things you can do, where you are, or how much help you need from moment to moment from other human beings to continue to live. He said, look, those are all degreed, those are all episodic, they are all too weak to ground something as heavy as equal dignity. They're all too small and insignificant, superficial, in order to answer the question, what changed that made you from the kind of thing that I was allowed to do anything I wanted to the kind of thing that if I did the exact same thing to you in the next moment that you say I could do then, it would be the worst thing that I could do to another human being. They don't carry the philosophical burden of explaining that change of state. Become equipped to make that case. The next thing that I do is I point out to get involved locally. The first thing was be equipped to make the case. The second thing is be involved locally. A great defeater. I'm going to talk now in 2 and 3 about the two great defeaters that I see of people in the pro-life movement. The first one is they are paralyzed before they even get started. Thomas Sowell, economist, says that doing nothing is the only thing that we can do perfectly. That's the great attraction of doing nothing. I can be perfect at doing nothing. But any endeavor to make a change on the scale of what we're talking about when it gets into abortion is going to require me to make mistakes. I'm going to step out and to start to do things. And the bigger the problem, if I see it as a national problem, that is the Supreme Court, that is the President of the United States, that is handled at Congress, then it's separated from me in a way that I can't be actively participating in trying to limit the evil of abortion. So I tell people, don't think in terms of national, don't think in terms of international, think in terms of local. That's the beauty of First Care Women's Clinic. What is it? It's a place where the community that we live in cooperatively comes together and says, when a particular family or woman in our community is in pain and needs help, is afraid of the future, is afraid of the next step, we're going to collectively be there together for them to help them make a life-affirming decision. That is the power of working locally. We can fight Roe v. Wade, but on a national level, and to get involved with national organizations, and that's good. But when you're involved locally, you can help a young lady in your community that is being pressured by other people to do something that she doesn't want to do. You can help somebody that's being threatened by the taking away of resources if they have a child that they want to have. You can help somebody that's terrified of having a child, fearful of how it will impact their lives, and help them to see that it is undoubtedly true that child will impact their lives. But that impact doesn't have to be life-destroying or life-threatening. It doesn't have to rob their life of something they're anticipating. As a matter of fact, we can help them, that person at First Care Women's Clinic, see that this is going to be a blessing that they never anticipated. And it will transform their lives for certain, but for good as well. That's the power of being local in our efforts. We can cooperate together to help the people in this community. And then the third thing I said, the first thing I said was be equipped. The second thing I said was operate locally. And the third thing that I said was be encouraging and be encouraged. Be encouraging in how you take this on. Why? Because I said there was two ways that I see people beaten by abortion. One is they're paralyzed from the outset. The other is that they're beaten down by the gravity of it all. They lose and lose. For each one of the people that we've helped, we know there's people out there that were lied to or tricked or moved away from us and that we can't reach. For each of the people that we convince, we know there's people out there that remain hostile and attack. Look, the further I go in the organization that I've created working to limit abortion in this country, the more people say ugly and hateful things about me. We have to be encouraged and encouraging as we move forward. And here is ultimately the biggest thing about that. I was asked recently in an interview that I was doing with some people that were trying to find ways to motivate giving in this time of coronavirus lockdown, when people are seeing their finances limited in a way they might not have been before, when people are reevaluating where they're giving money, when people feel the whole world shut down around them. They said, Mr. Watts, this young lady that I was talking to who calls me Mr. Watts because I guess I'm getting old. On a side note as well, I was doing an interview with Students for Life of America's head Kristen Hawkins, and she called me the pro-life dad, largely because I was sitting in my lazy boy while I was doing the interview, but also because I assume I'm getting old. It reminded me of a quote from the movie Gandhi where his friend comes to him in jail and he says, they're calling you Bapu. And Gandhi says, yeah, I heard. And he said, I thought that meant father. And he said, yes, it does. And his friend said, what does that mean? And Gandhi's response was, it means we're getting old. And embracing the idea that the pro-life dad being called Mr. Watts by young professionals means that I'm getting older. And it's a sign of respect as well. She said, Mr. Watts, how do we encourage people to continue giving now? How do we help them to see the urgency now, today, when the whole world has changed overnight? I said, that's a surprisingly easy thing to answer. So what we can do is take a moment, and what I want everybody to do while we're thinking about this right now, while I said to be equipped to engaged, when I said to get involved locally, and why it's so important to fight, to be encouraging, and to be encouraged in our efforts, is because the whole world has shut down, and still abortion continues. Everything in our lives was taken away for a lot of people, and yet still the abortion doctors continue their work. The abortion advocates continue to fight for it. The lawsuits continue to be filed. The courts continue to do their thing to block local places, states, from stopping abortion during this time. The whole world was shut down by a global pandemic that we haven't seen the likes of in 100 years, and it wasn't enough to stop abortion. It won't go away unless we stay encouraging to each other and encouraged in our battle. As I mentioned Thomas Sowell earlier, we don't have to act perfectly. As a matter of fact, any attempt to act means we're necessarily going to make mistakes. But we do have to act. Because to stop something that even a pandemic couldn't slow down is going to take a concerted effort for all people of goodwill and good conscience who believe that the unborn ought to be treated with dignity and respect, to come alongside each other and to work tirelessly towards a goal that divided and individually we can never reach. But working together with God's blessing in a way that honors Christ, as we can by supporting First Care Women's Clinic, by continuing to support them even as the world gets weirder and weirder. By doing that, we can do things together with God that are so overwhelmingly difficult to do alone. We cannot feel, because we haven't gotten where we want to, like we have failed. We have to feel as we wake up and realize the world that we live in, so determined to do wrong, that we must be equally and more determined to do right.
Hi, Jay.
Hey, Lori.
Well, we're not at a banquet hall. We're in not in the ballroom.
No.
We're here. But it's good to see you.
It's great to be here.
I really appreciate you being our speaker this year. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time with you, just you and me, because I know that there's a lot of questions that some of our viewers may have. And hopefully, through some of the things that we talk about, they might get some of those answered. One of the things that I was talking about when I spoke was about the fact that I think that even though statistics haven't proved it out yet, that I do believe that abortions might be on the rise because of what's going on with COVID-19. Do you feel that too?
Yeah, we don't, as you said, we don't have data on it, but what we do have is evidence through the testimony of like sidewalk counselors who we know were there prior, who've been there for years. I mean, sidewalk counselors tend to be a very loyal group of people who have been doing this for years, standing in front of the same clinics. And so right as the outbreak of coronavirus and shelter in place started, you heard stories from sidewalk counselors that abortion facilities were seeing an increase in traffic, a great increase in traffic for many of them, saying that on some days they'd seen the busiest days they'd ever seen there.
Yeah.
So without being able to point to actual data, I do think that the testimony of those people is fairly reliable.
Well, the Planned Parenthood that's right down from us, less than a mile away, their parking lot is fuller for certain. We also get a lot of calls. Our phones are ringing off the hook, and we're here, and we're receiving these women, and we're receiving more calls than ever for abortion-minded women. So with all of that in mind, it's kind of evidence that I think that the fear that's around COVID-19 and all that's going on has affected women's decisions as they become pregnant.
Absolutely. You and I have talked about that before, that when a culture embraces something negative like this, in the sense of the fear that has gone around, the uncertainty, the concern about the future, they start making decisions out of desperation, right? Instead of, and obviously it's just, yeah, it multiplies, right? That's why as agents of peace, I take that very serious as a ministry, that we operate in peace, because fear multiplies bad things.
Yes, it does. It does. And one of the things I notice when we see these women is that they're not as afraid of the virus as they are of the unknown that it's causing, like the
Yeah.
stable economy. And I think we all kind of have that. But one of the things that really was confusing for me in the beginning was the fact that, we were moving forward. We were going to be expanding our medical staffing so that we could really work toward being the alternative to Planned Parenthood. And then just seeing this virus kind of make us focus on that core part of our mission, which is helping these abortion-minded women, but we're also helping the families that we serve. And there was this woman that called us up, and well, we sent a lot of things, but this one particular woman that we had served before called us very concerned because she didn't have formula for her baby, and we give it out. We've got a lot of formula, but this was a particular kind for, I guess, sensitive stomach or something, and she did not have the ability. I mean, it wasn't in the stores. That was when hoarding was going on.
Yeah.
And, the stores were just hard to find diapers or wipes, even if you had the money or formula. So I looked it up online and I said, oh, I see it online. She said, well, I don't even have a card to use to order something online. I have no ability. I don't have a bank account. I don't have anything. So I just said, oh, let me check it. And I found it and I said, what's your address? And she goes, what are you doing? And I go, I'm ordering it for you and it'll be at your doorstep. And then what's wonderful is, how the Amazon will show a picture of the porch and say, this item was delivered, and that's at their doorstep. So that happened to more than one client, but to be able to reach out to them is a wonderful thing. But as we're looking at, the plans that we had, I think one of the things that makes me feel really good is that we are in a good place. We always, as an organization, and you're on our board as well, we always plan for the unforeseen.
Yeah.
And this is certainly an unforeseen, isn't it?
Yeah, it changed everything for everybody in a very short period of time. And I think that's the great thing that I love about that story you just shared. Is a great example of proactive ministry, right? Of an organization being proactive in pursuit of the mission. And that is what had to happen at the time that all of this changed. The ability to adapt, I look for, I talk about that a lot now in talks, that going forward, not just people, but also organizations, we're going to have an adaptability. The rate of change accelerates all the time. And that is the predictable change that we see just through the growth of the economy, the growth of technological ability, advancement, changing of cultural morals. And then there's the unpredictable stuff like this, where people are having financial issues that they didn't have or couldn't even see coming 3 or 4 months ago at all. There was no way to predict what's happening right now. But in the face of these things, as you talked about, within First Care Women's Clinic, there has always been, within the DNA of the organization, let us do as best we can to prepare this organization to operate in the unforeseen. So that when things happen that we could not predict, could not see, that we're prepared to pivot what we do. In a podcast recently, I talked about the idea that what COVID and Corona did when we were all forced to separate was it changed the means by which we pursue our goals. It didn't change our goals and it didn't change our mission, but it forced all of us to immediately become adaptable, to find new ways, new resources, new methods to serve our previous missions. And First Care Women's Clinic was uniquely set up to that, not just because, and obviously because of the donor support that put them in a financially healthy position going into this, so that you could proactively pursue ministry opportunities like you just described, but also because of the vision that's been cast and that you have been enacting for years to change the way that we do things to meet the current challenge, right? When things are founded, they're founded to meet the challenge of that moment. And as the challenge changes, the corporation, organization, the body has to change to meet the new challenge. And you and the leadership of First Care Women's Clinic have been driving this organization towards change that clearly, as you and I have talked privately, is clearly a demonstration that God has his hand on this ministry. Yes. He has put this ministry in a position so that as the unexpected happened, it was uniquely situated to continue the impact that it has had as an institution in this community for years.
Well, do you think that as Christians, working in different types of ministries, do you think that this pandemic has caused people to kind of back away, or are they advancing even stronger into the missions that God's called them into? Are they engaged?
Well, I don't think when you talk about the public faces of organizations, I have not seen there those of us who represent the organizations that we're involved with in the community as the public face of it, you and I don't think I've seen a backing down from there. What is going to be interesting about this, and this will be we'll only see months from now the full impact of what's going on, is whether or not the force of people that those of us like you and I that we rely on to do the work that we do, whether they have lost focus. Because the organization and all the things that we do is not done by just the people in the building. Obviously, we know all of the things that we do aren't possible without a massive support team, without the communities that we work for and represent being behind us and supplying the needs that we have in order to proactively seek mission opportunities, as opposed to reactively where things happen and we try to figure out if we can help. We see opportunities and we're positioned to help immediately without having to ask at each particular situation of the support group that we have. That will be the question that we got to see, because I don't see the leadership struggling with refocusing, but have the support teams, the people that make all this possible, the mountain of human will and energy and financial support and prayer that makes an organization like First Care Women's Clinic possible. Will they have backed off when we see in the long run? I think we are going to only know that as we go back to normal over the next few months to see if there are any organizations that are going to struggle coming out of the gates versus those that were able to gather the collective will of the people that support them and say, there's no hiatus, no break, abortion hasn't slowed down, and you have to be with us to work as a team faithfully to continue our mission. Even as the circumstances have changed, the mission stays the same, and the evil that we fight seems to be only growing in power and boldness.
One of the things I love is I do get a lot of people that call and just say, we're praying for you. And,
Yeah,
that means so much because
it does.
it just shows that their thoughts and prayers are with us. They know how difficult this battle is. They know that, we're here in the midst of an epidemic and a pandemic, and we're serving. And I think that makes them feel good to know that they're supporting an organization that didn't back away.
Yep. And that's a hopeful sign too, that when in the midst of, because we know a lot of these people in our community are hurting or concerned because their whole lives have been upended in ways that perhaps our organizations have not been. First Care Women's Clinic was blessed by God to have strength going into this to continue operating. But it's meaningful and I think encouraging to know that people in our community, as they see the world being changed a bit, are thinking about First Care Women's Clinic, thinking about the women and families that come in those doors, thinking about the people that they know are prayerfully working there every day. That's a good sign. That's a good sign that in the midst of all of this, because I had the same experience. People call me and want to know, how are you doing? And I take that's very meaningful to me because they have their own problems right now. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they still value what's going on at First Care Women's Clinic enough to call you up and say, you're on our hearts, you're on our minds, we're praying for you. That is encouraging.
Well, the adaptability of this organization to take this type of change and to operate in, when you're going one way and you're headed towards something. And as we were this year, this was our ramp up year, for really increasing our medical that draws more women to us. The adaptability was taught. I learned that over time. I have to tell you, God would give you a vision and you think it's starting tomorrow. And then, you find it doesn't start tomorrow. And so really one of the things that God has always taught me is do your homework. You don't just jump into something, you do your homework. And I think that has been invaluable to me during this time. Well, one of the things that I, hope that this whole thing that, that we're doing in lieu of a banquet does is let the supporters, that people who have invested in the lives of men and women in their community all these years will see is that we're going strong. We're going to get through this. We are as concerned. We're extremely concerned because I really don't want to look and see the abortion stats for 2020 to be dismal and think, could we have done more? And I really do. I think that one thing it has done is it's really cemented this vision, because we don't want women going to abortion clinics where they don't get another option and they don't get any hope and they don't hear about hope in Christ. We want to be that place, and that's where we're going. We've already moved in that direction over the years, and we're just going even more. And so it really kind of impassions you more to do that. And one of the things we really want our supporters to do, and those that we partner with, is literally invest in partners.
Yep.
Is to be encouraged by that and know that they're making a good investment in this ministry. I've been in this ministry for a long time, and I am so proud of what it does to help people and how many children it saved, and just the integrity of it, and the people, the caliber of people here are just amazing, just incredible. I mean, you're on the board. What are you going to say? But
okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that one of the things you said there, and I know we've talked about this before, what you want the donors, the supporters, those people who make all this possible to understand is that we understand what we're asking for when we ask for donations, right? We understand that the money that they've earned came from the minutes and the hours, the days, the years that they've worked. And that we believe that the best way to honor those gifts is for those to be partnered with an organization that has impact in an area that matters to them, that they care about. And seeing how God loves First Care Women's Clinic. I loved it when it was Cobb Pregnancy Services, loves it as First Care Women's Clinic, loves the mission, loves the just every aspect of it, protects it, guides it through things like today. It's just it's a powerful testimony to the impact that this organization has had for years before today and will have going forward. And so I feel confident when I go to people and say, this is an organization you can feel good supporting. This is an organization that you can feel good knowing that when your money, your time, your effort, the gift of your life is given to this organization, it will have an impact on the people in your community. You're acting locally to reach out to the people that live in your community in their time of crisis, and you're giving them hope. You're giving them an alternative to the darkness that's down the street and around the corner and the other places that will tell them to do something that they will regret for the rest of their life. And if they don't, they should.
Right.
And we give them the opportunity to find hope and life. And it's just, as you said, I mean, I've worked there as an employee and as a part of the team before I left and started other endeavors. The people there, it's like God just brings the greatest people from our community, from all the congregations in our community, into one building, and to find a Christ-like way to fight a great evil in our world.
That's the truth. You know, we have kind of evolved, and pregnancy centers have, and we've gone from little small places to larger places. And those that partner with us have kind of gone with us. It's been because the culture is changing.
Yes.
We have to change. And one of the things that I would really want us to do is thank our partners, because we are where we are because of them. And every person that is lives are touched, every baby that is saved, everyone that is helped, it's because of their support. And I believe that as we move forward, we're going to need them like never before. And I'm asking them during this time when we don't have a banquet to really show that it didn't matter that we weren't in a ballroom and we weren't at a table eating a meal, that what mattered was what we do, and that there will be support for that like never before. And just trusting in God that with an open hand we give during a time when the battles don't stop. They keep going in the midst of a crisis. Thank you, Jay, for speaking with us tonight. Thank you for all you've done for the ministry and for life. God bless you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope that this really kind of got you more in touch with who we are, and who you are is part of it. And I ask you, if you haven't done already, please give. Pray for us. We're praying for you and for your families, for safety, and just pray for our country that one day this will be behind us. God bless you. Good night.
Amen.